All right, senior reporter Aviwe Mtila is following the story, and he joins us now live from Megawatt Park in Johannesburg. Aviwe, what's been the reaction from some of the members of SCOPA as executives at Eskom are saying that government was harsh against Director?
Good afternoon, Maseko. And in fact, the Standing Committee on Public Accounts here is hearing of cartels, in fact, that are stealing fuel, stealing electricity, as well as coal, for example, in power stations like Tutuka. We're hearing here that the GM, that's the general manager, had to be accompanied by bodyguards all the time. Some of the revelations, of course, as we hear, this meeting that is with the board of Eskom, and tomorrow we're expecting the CEO of Eskom. But just yesterday, they went and paid a visit to the Tutuka power station. In fact, let me bring in the whip of SCOPA here, Peggy Hadeba, just to give us insight. Maybe, Peggy, thank you for joining us at eNCA. Maybe just on what you found at Tutuka and the purpose behind visiting Tutuka power station yesterday.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. Indeed, upon arrival at Tutuka, one would have been forgiven to think that we are entering a war zone. We were greeted by the army patrolling around and the high number of security, which confirm the reports that we've been receiving that the former group executive there was going around with bodyguards and 24/7 bulletproof vest, and family members were at risk as well. Kids were going to school under heavy security protection. So we wanted to see for ourselves what are the contributing factors, engage with the staff around and pay a visit to all the areas that were mentioned as being part of the contributing factor, the stores and the distribution facilities, also the trucks when they arrive with the fuel, all what are the processes and the measures in place to ensure that they nip it in the bud. So we've witnessed and we've seen for ourselves, but what I can tell you is that the picture is looking good. The group executive has been relocated. There's a new general manager as we speak, and he does not go around with bodyguards. It's someone that has been with the Eskom since 1994. He understands the area. There are security measures that have been put in place. I cannot disclose the level of security just to protect the operations at Eskom. But as things stand, there are improvements. But the worrying factor is the energy availability factor at Tutuka. When we were there, only 2 units were fully functional out of 6. The entire power station ought to be producing the 36,000 megawatts, but only 2 units were fully functional. Towards the end of our visit, the 3rd unit came into full swing. So there still are issues with energy availability factor.
I want to come then to today's meeting. There was that explosive interview, of course, on eNCA with eNCA Andre Director there. But we heard from the head of legal that this is all something, those revelations that we heard there, is something that the board of Eskom, the management of Eskom, all knew about. So she couldn't understand why then Andre Director's term was essentially cut very short. What's your sentiment as SCOPA? Do you think that all that we heard in that interview is something that we knew before?
It's quite concerning when the EXCO, the executive management, and the board, which is the accounting authority, are not speaking with one voice. The board were of the view that the interview had brought the entity into disrepute, but the head of legal and compliance says there was nothing what Director raised that is bringing the Eskom into disrepute. Now, when you have an institution and the executive management and the board of directors are not speaking with one voice, that's a serious area for concern. Well, when we probed, it became clear and we understood that the head of legal and compliance was headhunted, and at the time the person in charge and responsible, the group chief executive, was Mr. Andre Director. So to a certain extent one asks himself whether or not is the person sympathetic to the person who had headhunted him. That's another area of concern, but she has cleared in that regard and said no, she's professional in her work, but one still wonders why would they speak two different versions when they're serving one institution.
And she has since resigned. We understand she's serving the term of notice, that's the legal head at Eskom. Are you any clearer as to why she's resigned?
She did not want to disclose the circumstances surrounding her resignation. She said it's private and personal. But subsequent to the departure of Mr. Andereter, she did allude to the fact that there are certain things. She indicated that there are three things that made her to resort into resignation. So we'll wait for the due processes to unfold and for the board to account as to what led to her resignation, for us to be able to not repeat the same mistakes. If there are any issues that needs to be attended to, the board will indicate when the time is right, but we are concerned. It can't be that senior executives are resigning at Eskom and they are pointing to unfriendly environment within in which they're working under.
And then I must come then on the stand now, in the meeting now was the head of procurement at Eskom, and what was in question is that R500 million tender, and if the procurement processes were followed. And she says indeed those procurement processes were followed, but there are questions around the intelligence report that suggested that there was a threat. Is it clear that every process was followed in awarding this R500 million tender?
It's quite concerning because they are found wanting. They don't have the recollection of the actual data that was presented to them. But one is made to understand that prior the approval of an emergency contract, there has to be someone that declares an emergency, and threat assessment has to be conducted and evaluated, and if it's not done by SAP, it must be done by state security agents. If not, it must be done by the head of security at Eskom. But that information, it's not there. They don't have recollection of such. One wonders whether or not it was not just another ticking box exercise where someone has already decided this money must go to this particular individual, because we are told that even the report came with the preferred service provider, and it was signed, approved. Those that were responsible with verification of the processes also signed and approved. But when you ask them, have you dealt with all the details that warrant such to be approved, they said they don't have a recollection. Yet this matter is investigated. There were several stakeholders who complained in relation to how this matter was handled and awarded. But when you ask a question, none of the responsible person seemed to be privy of the details and the circumstances surrounding such. So that's the matter that we need to follow closely. We're not going to let it slide. We have requested them to provide us with detailed information from the inception to the end. Who declared an emergency? Under which circumstances was it informed by the intelligence report that they don't have in their disposal? That will be reckless and irrational to approve an emergency based on a report that you do not have. I hope it is not based on the intelligence report that Eskom does not have in its possession. And if it is, then it's a serious area for concern. We need to probe and pursue what was the intention of declaring an emergency when you don't have relevant data to conclude as such.
All right. Thank you very much, Becky Hatebe, the whip of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts here, as they've just taken a short break, 30 minutes, coming back at 2:30. And that head of procurement at Eskom will be back in the hot seat, as, of course, we heard there. She says that all the due processes, Maseko, were followed in awarding that R500 million tender for 3 months for security. But we heard here that, in fact, there is no intelligence report that suggested that there is a threat. Well, she says that there's no report that came forward to her. She's not aware of any report. Of course, we're back at 2:30 with the continuation here of this meeting by SCOPA with the Eskom board and some of the executives at the power utility.